Hello friends, today we are going to be doing a reading vlog where I read a book whose title I haven't even memorized enough to say it when I hold it up. Nancy Drew and the Hardy Boys Super Mysteries Operation Titanic. Okay, I just have to say it. It has to be said. I have to get it out in the open. This is one of the most hideous covers I have ever seen. It's all photos of real people, and I think it's Joe in the back. Looks like he's about 40 years old. But whatever, it's a Nancy Drew and Hardy Boys super mystery. We can't judge a book by its cover. Surely inside there will be lots of juicy Nancy and Frank drama for you Francie fanciers out there. Which is not me personally, but I live to serve. So, Operation Titanic, what is going on here? Let's find out by reading the synopsis. America's hottest teen detectives, there they go again, just calling them super hot. Just the sexiest teen detectives around, which feels weird to say about teens. Anyway, America's hottest teen detectives team up when evil plunges to dark new depths on the high seas. Together with Bess, Nancy Drew, in all capitals, is on a cruise to adventure, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to witness the raising of the Titanic. When was this written? Because I don't think it's possible to raise the Titanic. I think they've determined it's in too much of a degraded state to raise it without completely destroying it. 1998. Okay. This book is basically an antique at this point. This book is basically like the Titanic itself. It's ancient history. That was a joke, by the way. Just so you know. I have a very sophisticated sense of humor. Most people just wouldn't get it. But she has uncovered evidence that their ship may be under threat from a rogue CIA agent. That's my least favorite type of Nancy Drew plot, I think, when she gets involved with the government and spies and nonsense like that. As they follow the Titanic's fateful course into the icy waters of the North Atlantic, Nancy suspects that they too are on a voyage to disaster. Yeah, come on, what could go wrong? Retracking the steps of the Titanic? Why would you ever think that was a good idea? Wouldn't you have at least a little sense of tragedy? Wouldn't your spidey senses start going off? I wouldn't risk it, personally. I would not risk it. You will see me on dry land waving my little handkerchief as Nancy's boat leaves the shore. Meanwhile, a helicopter swoops down onto the deck of Nancy's ship. On board are Frank and Joe Hardy. Posing as journalists, they are in fact working undercover for the network, the ultra-secret U.S. intelligence agency. Their mission, unmask a master of disguise who's planning to use the ship to pull off a chilling terrorist act. For Nancy Drew and the Hardys, uncovering the explosive truth about what lies at the bottom of the ocean is just the tip of the iceberg. I can't believe they went there. People died, and you're out here making tip of the iceberg jokes? Get out of here, Carolyn Keene. Anyway, I'm just gonna crack into this like the Titanic cracked in half. See, Carolyn Keene is not the only one who can make offensive jokes about the Titanic and all the people who died on it. But we will see how many more borderline insensitive remarks and puns she can make about the Titanic as I read on. Okay, I've read a bit now, and I wanted to do a little check-in. First off, I have to say, I'm on page 75. They're not at the Titanic yet. They have not stepped aboard a boat. They have not even glimpsed the ocean. This book starts off very dramatically with Nancy getting involved in an FBI raid, a very dramatic, daring, nighttime FBI raid of a ticket scalper. Really, people? Really? That's who you're doing your big raid on? But I guess FBI people raid Twitch streamers and such all the time, so maybe they do just have a lot of free time on their hands. Anyway, a whole bunch of characters get introduced, all men. This book feels very much like it could be a Mission Impossible movie. They've got this little team set up they're working on these daring missions. You've got the CIA, the FBI, they mention MI6, the IRA, like Soviet Russia, the fall of the Berlin Wall. This book is taking itself seriously. So they go to this apartment to raid this ticket scalper guy. They go inside and find that he has a gun, which if I was running like this ticket giveaway scam, I don't think I'd bring a gun with me, but again, this is America, so things work differently there. But Nancy thinks to herself, oh, I don't know how I can explain it to Daddy Drew if I get shot. And it's like, well, you won't have to if you're dead. Anyway, this is all in the first chapter, and 2 people get shot. The ticket scalper guy, in fact, is shot by an alien. This book is wild so far, and then it starts doing these super short sections where you cut between the Hardy Boys and what they're doing and what Nancy is doing, and it's all super quick and fast paced. The Hardy Boys are driving their van to meet their buddy, whose name I forget. There are so many men in this book. There are way too many men. I can't be expected to remember all of them. Anyway, they're driving to meet their buddy who works at like an oceanography institute. And while they're there, they realize this car is tailing them. Then they realize the car is trying to ram them off the road. And then they realize the people in the car have guns and are shooting at them. This book is intense. You've got people shooting military-grade pistols. You've got them shooting M16s. This doesn't feel like a Nancy Drew book. People have been literally popping off with their guns every single chapter. At least 1 bullet is fired, usually quite a few more. Anyway, Frank and Joe are hunted down by these group of people in the van and a bunch of other motorcycle couriers. They seem to be like Russians. They chase them down. They're like, why are you going to the Oceanography Institute? And Frank and Joe are like, dude, we're going snorkeling. They're like, okay, well, you better forget this ever happened. I think you should go home and forget the snorkeling. And they're like, this is weird. What's going on? Then their buddy, the ocean guy, arrives in a helicopter to rescue them. And they're like, why would this guy want to chase you? And he's like, I don't know. I'm doing a fish census at the moment. Maybe they're interested in that. Meanwhile, Nancy is involved with like the FBI and the police trying to figure out what is going on with this alien shooter. They get some footage of him and he turns out to be this rogue CIA agent who was presumed to be dead, named... his name is so stupid. What is it? Jericho, like Amos Jericho, I think his name is. He's this ex-CIA agent who became like a rogue agent and started to just like work to get billionaires' wealth out of their countries. And this is all involved with the Titanic, so he's trying to get a ticket for this Titanic cruise so that he can get valuables from the Titanic. Just like, this is a bit of an involved plan. And apparently they think people are going to be able to recover like papers and documents from the ship. It's like they would be destroyed, disintegrated, intensely water damaged. Why would they think they can retrieve papers from here? And it turns out this whole cruise to see the Titanic and the raising of the Titanic is funded by an eccentric billionaire. A daring, bold, and ill-advised journey involving the Titanic. Why does that sound so familiar? Oh, I know, there is that submarine with a bunch of billionaires where everyone died trying to view the Titanic. Nancy Drew predicted that. She predicted that in 1998. Anyway, this billionaire shows up, and he's this guy called Welsh. Something Welsh? Mr. Welsh? There's too many men, I'm telling you. There's too many men. Walter Welsh. Sexy 35-year-old billionaire Walter Welsh. And Nancy thinks she tried to concentrate on the file she was going through, but she found it was almost impossible. She'd been around rich and powerful men before, but Welsh exuded an aura that was almost physical. I'm like clutching my pearls over here. Nancy, A, this man is 35. B, I went into this book expecting if there was any romantic drama, it was going to involve Frank. And C, if it did, like that it wouldn't be anything physical or even almost physical. My goodness. I chose this book to read for this vlog because I thought it would be juicy. It's like a Nancy Drew Files, basically, but with the Hardy Boys, which is like maximum juice. Max juice. Sounds like a character in this book, to be honest. But I did not expect it to be this dramatic. I think it's a bit too dramatic for me, all this stuff about, like, secret agents, spies, the FBI, the CIA, the KGB, all these people, like, rat-a-tat-tat, shooting their guns all over the place, is a bit too much. It's not my preferred flavor of Nancy Drew book. I much prefer the more traditional kind of mysteries, especially a murder mystery. Not that we get those very often. But like this one, someone dies in the very first chapter. Someone is shot to death by an alien in the very first chapter. They went far. They took this far. They took this places. They took this all the way into the ocean to see the Titanic. Well, not yet. But yeah, this has been absolutely wild so far. Like, not just the whole guy getting murdered by an alien with a gun, but there's also a character called DJ Virgil Laser, which is quite a name. There's also a scene where Frank strangles a snake. This book is not afraid to take things and push them to the absolute limits of reality, and I love that. Also, the writing is kind of, I don't want to say it's necessarily impressive for a Nancy Drew book, but it's less basic than it usually is. Like, I feel like the writer was more into adding their own embellishments than usual. Like, when the snake attacks, it's like the scaled flesh of a snake glided across his cheek as quick as hot oil and as cool as ice. Like, ooh, those are some creative similes there. Maybe not cool as ice, but like quick as hot oil? Dang, they did something there. Another big element of this book has been, like, technology. You can tell it's, like, that period in the 90s when every TV show and movie was, like, imagining it as this super futuristic, unrealistic thing. Like, on one hand, you've got them calling their cell phones cellular phones all the time, like their grandmas, but on the other hand, they're like using computer enhancement technology to like sharpen this grainy CCTV image of their alien suspect. And like Nancy has these two buddies, and one of them is like a hacker. He's a whiz at computers and hacking, and the other one is a producer for a radio show. And a lot of it really is about these technological advancements and using them to solve their cases. Here's a choice line. They're talking about this computer in the police station, which they have nicknamed Old Bessie, and this hacker whiz at computers guy is like, another 6 months and old Bessie won't even qualify as an organ donor in the field of cybernetics. Like, cybernetics is just such a 90s buzzword. Like, I don't think you'd hear people talking about computers with terms like cybernetics in 2024. Anyway, we're about to start the field trip portion of this vlog. So there's a chain of bookstores here in the UK called Waterstones, which are basically the equivalent of Barnes & Noble or Indigo if you live in Canada, although they're a lot better than Indigo, but we don't need to get into that. But there's a local one in the city I'm living in, and they have a cafe, and I keep meaning to check it out, so I think I'm gonna go there, bring my book, do a little reading in the cafe. Yes, I'm gonna be so daring and bold and read a Nancy Drew book in public as a grown lady, because I don't care. To be cringe is to be free. And I might pick myself up a non-Nancy Drew book while I'm there. I might indulge myself in just one little itty-bitty book. We'll see. Like, I couldn't pick up a Nancy Drew book even if I wanted to, because they don't sell them, to the best of my knowledge. People don't really read Nancy Drew in the UK, so, I've got to pull all that weight. I've got to shoulder that burden of being the girl who reads just too much Nancy Drew to make up for the rest of the population not reading enough. Anyway, without further ado, let's hit the road, hit the old dusty trail. Hello again, I'm back from our little excursion, and I did end up buying a book. I bought Betty by Tiffany McDaniel, which is a bit of an impulse buy for me, even though I've been eyeing this book up in stores for months because I've never read anything by this author before, but it sounds like something I'd like, and it has an absolute kicker of a first line. A girl comes of age against the knife. She must learn to bear its blade, to be cut, to bleed, to scar over and still somehow be beautiful and with good enough knees to take the sponge to the kitchen floor every Saturday. That's such an opener. That's such a gorgeous opener. I've heard this one is kind of like heartbreaking and hard to bear, and it's actually inspired by, I think, Tiffany McDaniel's mother, her life, but it sounds like it's going to be beautifully written at the same time, and sometimes you just want your heart to get shredded into tiny pieces by a book. Isn't that just the power of fiction and of art? Anyway, speaking of the power of fiction, let's talk about Operation Titanic. I read 75 more pages, and let me tell you, that puts me at page 150. They are still not on the boat. They are still not anywhere near the boat. They have not even touched the water. And might I remind you, this is supposed to be the premise of the book, what it talks about on the back. Nancy has the once in a lifetime opportunity to witness the raising of the Titanic. Not happened yet. A helicopter swoops down onto the deck of Nancy's ship. Definitely not happened yet. Nancy and the Hardys have not even met up. They aren't even aware of what each other is doing in this book yet, which, in my experience of the Nancy Drew and Hardy Boys super mysteries, is a bit rare. Usually there's some more interactions, there's the Francie content that the people want, but not in this one. So I'll catch you up to date on what's been going on. So Nancy has been invited aboard this Titanic voyage, or this cruise voyage, to witness the raising of the Titanic, but like I say, don't think she's actually on there yet. First, she is invited by this, Walter Welsh, the billionaire. She's like, oh, Bess, come along with me. We find out George is away being like a camp counselor in the Grand Canyon. Apparently Nancy wrote her a letter of recommendation for this job, and I was like, her friend wrote her a letter of recommendation. Like, who's gonna be like, oh yeah, my friend is great, please hire her? That's not what you do, Nancy. Anyway, I just thought that was like stupid. So she and Bess are like, woohoo, or Bess especially is like, woohoo, we're gonna go on this Titanic voyage. And so they are in Chicago. Bess is like, let's go on a shopping spree. Whoop-de-doo. Bess is like, do you know how many people would kill to go where we're going to be? And Nancy is like, Bess, what did you just say? Nancy's shock must have shown on her face. That was what had happened the night before. Oops, Bess said. Awkward when your best friend actually makes a boo-boo and references a man getting killed, which actually did happen to you the night before. Oopsie. Whoops. What a social faux pas, Bess. I can't believe she didn't think about her friend's traumatic incident the night before when she was using that figure of speech. Yeah, Bess is really excited. They're at the hotel. She's like, the band of thieves you're hoping to find is probably long gone by now. She opened the door, but stopped dead. A hard-faced man filled the doorway. He held a small black pistol, a gloved hand pointed straight at Bess's heart. You know, if this man has nothing else, he's got great comedic timing. Actually, apparently this is a spy named Chauncey Forsyth. So, you know, if nothing else, he's got great comedic timing and a memorable name. But he's apparently buddy with Jericho, Amos Jericho, the ex-CIA agent who hasn't actually appeared yet at all in this book. I don't believe, though, that there's ever been an actual man in the world called Chauncey Forsyth. Please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but I just don't believe there is ever anyone named that. I don't believe that's a real name that people call their little baby. Oh, this is my little baby Chauncey Forsyth. Like, can you imagine, like, coochie coochie coo, Chauncey Forsyth? No. And then Walter Welsh seems weirdly invested in Nancy and Bess for a 35-year-old man. Like, these are two teenage girls, two 18-year-old girls. We have a scene where Bess and Nancy are out shopping. Nancy's trying on a dress, which is pretty short. She thinks it's rather daring, shakes her head at her reflection. No, a masculine voice stated. It would be a crime to talk yourself out of that dress. And it's, Mr. Welsh creeping around. Like, she's like, what are you doing here? And he's like, yeah, I've had a security team following you around ever since we talked yesterday. Nancy's like, that's an invasion of privacy, which, you know, good for her. His response is, my apologies. I only had your best interest at heart. Nancy dismissed his excuse, saying, the words of any number of would-be dictators. That's my girl. Oh my god. I was so excited about that. I almost shook my bookmark out of my book, but that's my girl. I love that. There's this man creeping on her, and she's like, you remind me of a would-be dictator. Get the f*** out of here, you creep. Anyway, then Bess comes up, and he's like, oh, a lovely outfit, Ms. Marvin. Please, I'm too young to be Ms. Marvin. Call me Bess. And I'm too young to be Mr. Welsh. Walter, please. He gazed at Nancy. May I use your first name, Miss True? Of course, Nancy said, but I'm not too young for anything. Nancy, don't say that. Don't say that, Nancy. Do not say that. You are too young for a lot of things. Okay. You are certainly too young for this 35-year-old man. Then he invites them both to the launch party of his boat that, you know, and eventually, I assume, is going to view the raising of the Titanic. You know, maybe this is just a big debate, and, like, they're never actually gonna get to view the raising of the Titanic. Everything's gonna fall to pieces before they actually get out there, and all the cover images are just, like, a total lie. I wouldn't be surprised at this point. We're like, this is how much of the book I have left. This is how much I've read. No Titanic in this whole section. Anyway, they're invited to this launch party, which Bess is like, that's Mondo cool. I have absolutely no idea what Mondo cool means. These kids these days, they're slang. I don't know. I don't know if you know what Mondo cool means. Please feel free to educate me. Anyway, they go to this launch party, and there's an ice sculpture of the Titanic there, which is a bit on the nose, no? Anyway, that's about where we leave Nancy. Nothing much happens. They find another one of Amos Jericho's associates and arrest him at this gala. What's his name? Hugo Danby. I don't know if it's just a requirement that to work for Amos Jericho, you have to have a totally unlikely name, but it seems like that's something that he and all his associates have in common. And they're also like, what are they doing here? Why do they care so much about this? And I'm like, yeah, I'm wondering that too. Why are they so invested in seeing the Titanic be raised? What's their stake in that? What do they have to do with Walter Welsh? Then on the other hand, Frank and Joe have gone to this oceanographic institute to visit their buddy Eric, whose name I have remembered. Everyone who works there is a man, except for 2 people. I swear, I was reading this and they literally keep dropping the names of new men. I just can't keep up with all these men. Like, there was way too many men. Like, Hugo Danby, Amos Jericho, Walter Welsh, like that. And those are the names I remember. They're like, here's Collins, here's Candless, here's Lowell. I can't, express to you how many random men are in this book. Anyway, there are only 2 women who work at this oceanographic institute. One of them is named Libby McCarthy, and she's just, which is an incredible name also. I wish I was named Libby McCarthy, kind of. But anyway, she is described as having, salt and pepper hair, so I'm imagining a slightly older woman. Then we find out she's, the ex-girlfriend of, Walter Welsh, who's in his mid-30s? Is he into dating older women, or do they just think that, anyone who's above the age of 30 is just, or any woman I should say, who's crossed the threshold over 30 is just, an aged hag with grey hair. What? Anyway, the other woman shows up to breakfast the first day at this scientific institute wearing a bikini underneath, a little denim jacket. Joe tries to hit on her. She's not having it. And then on the next page, all the other guys who work at the institute, Dietrich, Coker, and Ventura. There's 3 more random men for you. They're like, yeah, actually, you should not try to hit on her. She's not into it. She'd rather be thought of as a young woman, not a girl. Yeah. Yeah. She spent a tour in the United States Air Force before the Institute was fortunate enough to acquire her services. She's a genius with a Klein side scan sonar, and she can handle nearly any vessel above or below the water. It's like they have the audacity to list out all her, scientific qualifications and be like, Joe, you need to think of this woman more than just a sexy little piece. The audacity that they have to do that when literally a page before they were objectifying her and being like, yeah, she showed up to breakfast at the scientific institute that she works at wearing a bikini. The audacity, you literally did that thing yourself that you're trying to berate Joe for. Then, Joe looks outside, someone's out on a boat. Oh, someone has a problem with the boat. There's smoke. The next instant, the boat blew up in an orange ball of flame and debris. Turns out, little sexy bikini science lady was on that boat. And luckily, Joe gets to be heroic. Frank and Joe both get to be heroic and help rescue her. There's an incredibly long, drawn-out sequence of them, rescuing all the people from this boat. It goes on a long time. Things just keep getting worse. The boat starts, sinking while they're still on board. At one point, Joe opens a window, which I'm like, if it was on fire, that seems like a really bad idea, but I don't know, I wasn't there. Anyway, and then Libby salt and pepper hair lady shows up, Libby McCarthy, and she's like, I think Walter Welsh did this to sabotage me because A, he's my ex-boyfriend, and B, because I'm opposed to him raising the Titanic. All those people died on it, we should let them rest in peace. And then she's like, oh yeah, and also He wants to sabotage me because I have this plan to get some really good footage of him raising the Titanic. And it's like, wait a moment, you're opposed to him raising the Titanic, but then you're like, yeah, I have this great plan where I'm gonna profit off him raising the Titanic by getting footage of him doing that. Yeah, okay. But in another turn of events, she has a very specific piece of equipment which she plans to take this footage, a 3-person deep diving pod, a little submersible. The manta is about the size of a college dorm room, some 20 feet long and 10 feet high. The prow blossomed out like an opaque bubble. Robot arms with huge claws stick out from beneath the prow, along with some very specialized camera equipment. Sound familiar? Sound freaking familiar? It's literally that thing that those billionaires died in. Like, that's what they're gonna take down. Obviously, they didn't know at the time, because this was like, I don't know, like 30 years before. But it's just wild. I could tell you, Libby, that is a ill-advised idea. Apparently it also costs like $20 million, so yeah, I got a lot in common with those poor, what do we say, poor billionaires? Those poor little billionaires who died. I mean, to be fair, it sounded like a horrible way to die, but yeah, Nancy Drew, Operation Titanic, predicted the future from 30 years ago. Pretty impressive, Ms. Carolyn Keene. No, my bookmark! No! No! How will I know where I was? It's okay, I'm being dramatic. I was literally at exactly page 150. I will survive. I'll persevere. Unlike most of those folks on the Titanic, they just didn't know how to persevere, man. They just didn't know how to survive like I do. I'm built different. You feel me? Anyway, then Frank and Joe go back to the site where they left their car at yesterday when they were rammed off the road. They're investigating. Joe noticed there's this guy spying on him with a gun. He chases after him. They're joined by another guy, and they're like, wait, hold on, fellas. We work for the network. The same guys that you work for. Like, this is my face when that happened. I was like, the plot thickens, man. But yeah, they're like, okay, don't follow us. We can't tell you why we're here. But see you guys. Yeah, they don't really say anything, and that's about where we are now. To be honest, there's a lot of like really kind of overcomplicated intrigue going on. I don't feel like a lot of interesting things have really happened. Like, get on with it. Get on the Titanic already. What are you doing? What are you doing messing around on land? I was promised the Titanic. This book is called Operation Titanic. Everything on the back talks about them being like on the ocean, like looking for the Titanic. And what do I get? Nancy going on a shopping spree. Joe flirting with scientists in bikinis. I mean, to be fair, there's a lot of explosions and guns going off. But it's not what I wanted, man. I didn't ask for this. Also, they find out, Frank and Joe, that the guys who shot at them from the car that pushed them off the road, half of the bullets they were firing were blanks. Not all of them, but some of the bullets. They find some real bullets and then some blanks. And it's like, what's the purpose of this? What's going on there? So I'm intrigued to find out about that. I'm very curious how they're going to pull all these different complicated plot elements together. But the next time you will see me, I think I will have finished the book, so we'll both have the answers to those questions. Hopefully. And hopefully we'll actually get to, go on a boat and see the fucking Titanic. The mother fucking Titanic. Come on now, be serious. Hello, I'm back and I have finished Operation Titanic, and let me tell you, this book went on some twists, it went on some turns, it was a journey, but was it a total shipwreck? Well, let me tell you. So the book picks up where I left off with Frank and Joe playing beach volleyball. I was like, I thought like they were in danger of their lives. There was a ship that exploded, people that shot at them, and now they're playing beach volleyball. But yeah, that's what they do. Mandy, the bikini-wearing scientist, is participating in the volleyball game. She and Joe are on the same team. Joe is still upset that he's been rebuffed. One of the other random men there is Oliver, who is Mandy's brother, and he says, she entered the Air Force after college. I didn't see her much until her hitch was over, and we hooked up here at Wedge Grove a few months ago. Sir, excuse me? You hooked up with your sister? Maybe rethink your word choice there, but of course the other random men pick up on that and they're like, I think Joe would definitely like to hook up with her here too. I don't even know what to say. They're like making funny incest sex jokes. Then they get a message that they have a phone call, and it is from this fellow called the Gray Man, who I think is like the guy in charge of the network, the government group that they're part of. It's confusing, to be honest. I think there's some continuity from other Nancy Drew super mysteries, but honestly, who reads these in order? Anyway, so they get assigned their mission by the Gray Man, the mission that is mentioned on the back of the book. Posing as journalists, they're in fact working undercover for the network. That mission, this happens on page 154 out of 215. And here are some other stats for you. Nancy doesn't actually board the cruise ship going to the raising of the Titanic until page 158. Nancy and the Hardy Boys don't actually meet until page 173, and then they split up again on page 180. Frank and Joe leave. I swear they're about only 10 pages in total in this book in which the Hardy Boys and Nancy share each other's company. Like, that's it. They are separate for the vast majority of the book. And so the Gray Man wants them to go on board this cruise liner going to the raising of the Titanic to identify an arms dealer and terrorist. Like, this book covers like everything. Like, they were stuffing as many things in here as possible. Like, they've got like every single thing they could think of is inside this book. Things just keep amping up. They're looking for a terrorist and arms dealer now. Also, it finally struck me about time, you're probably thinking, that this book was probably written in response to the Titanic movie in 1997. They were trying to capitalize on Titanic mania. I assume that was probably a thing that was happening, Titanic mania. Most of the rest of Nancy's portion of the book is her getting led around by Walter Welsh, the billionaire, who is still acting kind of creepy towards her. I say kind of. He's 35 years old and she's a teenager. There's no kind of about it. So Nancy and the Hardys meet up on the ship. Nancy's like, hey guys, here's why I'm here. This is all the details of my case. And Frank's like, that's cool, Nancy. I don't have anything to say to you. I'm not going to tell you about my case. Peace out. And then he and Joe leave. Frank and Joe actually see Bess first before they run into Nancy. And Joe's like, I wonder what she's doing here. Let me guess, Frank said. We're on a ship in the Atlantic on its way to observe the Titanic being raised. I've got it. She's probably here to see the Titanic being raised. Top tier comedy, Frank. Don't be hasty, Frank, Joe said. I think I'd investigate before jumping to a conclusion like that. The best comedic duo since Laurel and Hardy. Oh my god. The Hardy Boys? Laurel and Hardy? Coincidence? I think not. I don't know how much of this plot to describe to you, because I don't know how much you would care about the kind of nonsense plot of this book that just throws around random men and expects you to know who they are and care about them. Basically, they're still looking for this Amos Jericho fellow, the rogue CIA agent who apparently shot the ticket scalper at the start of the book while wearing an alien mask, which we never get an explanation for, by the way. They arrest one of his associates on the ship. Oh, it's Chauncey Forsyth, of course, and you know he's British, A, because of his name, and B, because he's like, "Oh, hello, love. Let's go back to my cabin, love." That's what he's like. Anyway, they arrest him and take him off the ship. Bam, 4 days later, it's time, finally, to raise the Titanic from the dead. Nancy is on board the cruise liner. Frank and Joe are on another ship with the oceanographic people, so they're oceans apart, basically. Joe joins the team to go down in the 3-person submersible. Joe? No, Joe! My sweet little boy, don't do this. Do you realize what could happen to you, Joe? However, although Nancy and Frank are on different ships, they're keeping in contact over their cellular phones. Nancy calls up and she's like, "Oh, keep your back covered, Frank. My intuition tells me that once the pieces fall into place, things are gonna happen very fast." Yeah, my intuition tells me that things are gonna happen very fast too, because there's less than 50 pages left in this book at this point. So Joe goes down the submersible. Frank is still on this oceanographic ship, and he follows one of the many random men in this book called Lowell, who is a security guy at the Oceanographic Institute, and also an ex-CIA agent. He overhears a phone call that Lowell makes on his cellular phone, and he's like, "Hey, I've got those nuclear warheads you wanted." And at this point I was like, nuclear warheads? Excuse me? I was not joking when I said they stuffed everything they could think of into this book. They're probably like, what's our next Nancy Drew Hardy Boys super mystery gonna be about? They got out a big whiteboard. They wrote down a bunch of ideas, everything they could think of. Terrorists, arms dealers, hackers, CIA, FBI, nuclear warheads. They wrote them all down. They looked at this board. They're like, you know what? Let's put them all in. Why not? Why not? They went mad with power, basically, my theory. So apparently, a lot of the people there are not there to see the Titanic being raised. They don't give a f about the Titanic being raised. They are just there because apparently a plane from the Gulf War, yeah, the Gulf War is in this as well. When I tell you everything is in here, I'm not kidding. Remember the Berlin Wall earlier? Yeah, they gotta throw that in. The IRA, put that in the mix too. Anyway, so in this story, the US were planning to use nuclear warheads in the Gulf War. They didn't end up doing that. One of the planes carrying these nuclear warheads crashed into the ocean, coincidentally, right next to the Titanic. So a lot of these people there are looking to retrieve these nuclear warheads. Meanwhile, on the luxury liner, they get raided by a bunch of armed men. It's just like the Titanic, except instead of hitting an iceberg, they get raided by men with guns. Not really the same thing. Honestly, not enough boats went down in this boat. Not enough ships sunk, which is very disappointing for a book about the Titanic. You know, I read a book about the Titanic, I expect some goddamn ships to sink, you know? You know what I'm saying? Anyway, Nancy's like, I know what's going on. This Amos Jericho guy, who supposedly died, but now he seems to have reappeared, he actually did die. He really did die. And Mr. Lowell, who was his former partner in the CIA, has decided to just use his name. Do you really care about this? Anyway, he's using his name to bring these people here. How do they explain Amos Jericho literally appearing earlier in the book? You may ask. If you care, which I don't think you probably don't, well, I'll tell you, they have made one of his associates a master of disguise. And he did it. Yeah. That's the way to get over any difficulty in a book. Bam, one of my characters is master of disguise. Instant fix for all my plot holes. Plot hole band-aid right there. And then Joe is in the submersible, which does not explode or anything of the sort. It doesn't even sink. Instead, he's down there with his buddy from the Oceanographic Institute, Eric, and he's down there with Mandy, sexy bikini scientist. And Mandy gets out a trank gun. She tranquilizes Eric and Joe, and then she gets on the phone, her cellular phone. Which, how does that work when she's deep under the ocean? Whatever. She calls up someone. Joe's witnessing this while he's in this groggy state before he's fully passed out. And she's like, "Come in, love. 10-4, love, my love." She doesn't say it in a Chauncey Forsythe way. She's not like, "Come in, love. 10-4, love." No, she's saying it like, "Oh, my love, I'm on my way to get the nuclear warheads. We're going to be rich, my love." And the guy he's talking to is Lowell. So they're in cahoots, if you even care. I know I don't really. Mandy has honestly barely appeared in this book. She wore a bikini, she played beach volleyball. That's what she's done. Honestly, at this point, this book has a lot of work to do to explain everything that it's put on the page, and I can tell you now, it does not accomplish that. It does not adequately explain things. Like the alien mask. I still can't get over the alien mask. Why was he wearing an alien mask when he was disguised anyway? Why did he disguise himself under the alien mask? He didn't know anyone could see him at that point. He was caught on CCTV. Why? Why did he put on a disguise over his disguise? Also, I have to tell you, they're still introducing random men on page 199. They give a name to this random guy, and that's the only time his name appears. It's please, you've already had enough random men. There should be a quota. There should be a limit to the amount of random men you can introduce into your book. Anyway, Frank manages to commandeer the sub. Nancy somehow manages to contact Walter Welsh and be like, "Hey, this is what's going down." And he's like, "Oh, don't worry. I got 4 army helicopters right here. Don't worry about those little old gunmen." They've also put a lot of mines on the cruise liner that are due to go off, by the way. That's another thing. If you needed anything else, I think there's already enough drama in here. I don't think they needed to add that. But like I say, they just put everything in the pot and called it a good one. Frank manages to subdue and capture Lowell. And at one point, he's got an assault rifle out. He's running and gunning. This is not your Nancy Drew game Hardy Boys. These are not 2 little twinks. These are action movie heroes with their assault rifles. I don't even know how to explain what happens at the end of the book, because I don't really understand. I don't think the ghostwriter really understands. So Walter Welsh, the billionaire who's there to raise the Titanic, he's like, "JK guys, I was never actually here to raise the Titanic. I have 0 interest in that. In fact, I think the Titanic should stay in the ocean. I don't think people should try to raise it. This was all just a front that was always meant to fail for the government, to distract people's attention while the government retrieves these nuclear warheads. It was all about the nuclear warheads. It was never about the Titanic. It is Operation Nuclear Warheads here." And they think that Lowell arranged the original attack on Frank and Joe when they are being, like, chased by that other car and rammed off the road. They don't know for sure. They don't explain why some of them were shooting with blanks or anything. They think that it was all just supposed to be a ploy to, like, threaten Libby McCarthy not to use her sub to film things, but then she does it anyway. And in fact, part of their plan hinges on using her sub via Mandy to raise the nuclear warheads. So this plot just doesn't make sense. This doesn't make sense. And that's fine. That is fine. Anyway, I'm sorry, Francie fanciers. You are going to be scrounging for crumbs in this book. I would not recommend it if you read these books for the Francie content. It is very light on the ground. At one point, Frank calls Nancy his feisty little friend. That's a new term for girlfriend that I've never heard. Hey, do you want to be my feisty little friend? And then at the end, there's a little interaction between Frank and Nancy. Nancy says, despite the fact that the Titanic will rest at the bottom of the ocean, at least for the time being, there's still going to be a Raise the Titanic dance tonight. Great theme. Are you asking me to go to the dance with you, Drew? Love that he calls her by her last name. I think that's actually really cute. Definitely not, Nancy said in feigned shock. However, I'm pointing out the opportunity you have for asking me. And then it ends. We don't know if they ever do go to the Raise the Titanic dance. Anyway, I read this whole book in a day. I'm pretty impressed with myself for that. It was 215 pages, and, like, I mean, this is like a Nancy Drew book. Like, it's a pretty quick read, but even still, I don't think I've ever read an entire one in a day before. It was a truly wild ride. I don't think the plot was very good. I actually think this is one of the worst Nancy Drew books I've read, especially one of the worst Nancy Drew and the Hardy Boys books that I've ever read. First of all, they just don't get into what they promised from the cover and the synopsis and the title and literally everything about it until, like, the last 50 pages or so. Secondly, they're just doing too much. There's just too much stuffed into this book, and it's honestly stuff I don't care about in my Nancys. Like, I don't care about your rogue CIA agents. Give me, like, a ghost horse or a secret passage in a spooky old mansion. I'm good, honestly. I'm a simple girl. I have simple needs. I don't need all this terrorist, arms dealer, Berlin Wall, Gulf War, nuclear warheads nonsense. Okay? Also, like I was pointing out, this plot has as many holes as the Titanic did when it sunk. It just fell to pieces like the Titanic when it hit the iceberg. Also, I really have to address this cover. It is a travesty now in multiple ways since I've seen it. At the top here, we have two people on the prow of the Titanic having their, like, Titanic moment. Does not happen in the book. They do not go to the prow of any ships to have a sweet little conversation. Picture number 2. We've got here a little guy in a lifeboat. Never happens. They don't go in any lifeboats in this book. Picture number 3. A gal and a man, probably supposed to be Nancy and Frank, in, like, a hold that is filling with water. Does not happen. Who gave the brief to this cover designer? Both they and the cover designer, I was gonna say, should be shot. That's a bit harsh. Maybe they should be put in a submersible for a couple of hours. See how they feel when they come out. Because it's a crime. It's a crime, honestly, that a book cover should be allowed to lie this much. Anyway, I've already yammered on for way too long. Oh my god, I've been talking for 27 minutes about this book just in this one clip. In conclusion, when put under pressure, this book fell to pieces. Much like the Titanic when it hit that iceberg. This book shouldn't be concerned with whether it's unsinkable, but whether it's unstinkable, because it definitely stinks. It stinks tank stunk. Did that work?